A bitter wind swept across the courtyard of Winterfell, swirling snow in ghostly eddies and carrying with it the faint tang of old blood. The great castle stood battered yet proud in the aftermath of countless battles, the War of the Five Kings, the onslaught of the Bolton occupation, and then Stannis' final stand. Once more, Winterfell changed hands, now reclaimed by those who bore its name with rightful pride. Atop the ramparts, the tattered Stark banners snapped restlessly as though refusing to remain still in the turbulent air. Jon Snow, newly proclaimed king in the north by the will of his bannermen, stood there overlooking the yard. Though they called him king, there was always an unspoken weight behind the title, a feeling of borrowed glory and a pinch of guilt that seeped into him like a festering wound. The North was rallying under his leadership, but deep in his heart he had begun to suspect the half-known truth, that his parentage was not what he had been led to believe. A single wolf's howl echoed across the snows of the courtyard, and Jon's heart constricted. Ghost was always near, a constant companion, but these days he roamed further at night, almost as if searching for something intangible. Or perhaps he sensed what Jon did, that the past was quickening like an unborn babe in the belly of the present, ready to break through the illusions of the world and scream its truths to everyone who would listen. That night, Jon was not alone on the ramparts. A solitary figure in red stood several steps behind him, her robes rippling in the wind. Melisandre of Ass High, the Red Woman who had once pinned her hopes on Stannis Baratheon as the promised savior, had turned her haunting gaze toward Jon now. She was the one who had prayed to the Lord of Light for his return when daggers in the dark had ended his life at Castle Black. She had felt the power surge through her and had seen what she believed to be a vision of a bright flame flickering behind his eyes. Melisandre's presence prickled at him. Her unwavering stare always made him uneasy, as if her eyes peered straight through flesh and bone into the marrow of his soul. Jon understood that she was as dangerous as any foe he had fought. Some nights he caught himself questioning whether the life she'd restored to him was a gift or a curse. In this moment, as the snow fell from the sky in large clumps, she took a silent step forward, her breath fogging in the icy air. "You stand watchful, my king," she said, her voice low and careful. "The darkness gathers. You can feel it, can you not?" Jon turned to her, the faint glow of torchlight outlining the intensity on his face. "I feel many things, my lady. I feel the cold, the weight of the crown I never asked for, the threat beyond the wall, and a sense of truths still hidden behind curtains I can't quite pull aside." Her red lips curled in what might have been sympathy or might have been triumph. Sometimes Jon could not decipher the difference. Men speak of crowns and wars. They speak of debts to be paid and vows to be kept. But your destiny isn't bound by these mundane shackles, Jon Snow. You are the song of ice and fire made flesh. The storms and blizzards of the north are your cradle, and the flames of Lawler are your guiding star. He disliked hearing her speak such prophecies, disliked the creeping sense that the path of his life was set before him, leaving little room to decide his own fate. "And what are the secrets I suspect my father kept from me?" he asked, turning fully to face her. "What does your Lord of Light say about the truth of my blood?" Melisandre's eyes flashed with something more than mere curiosity. She did not answer at once, but the night air pulsed with a sudden, unsettling electricity. Finally she spoke. "For months I have been plagued by visions. Some come to me in flames, others in dream. The snow always falls, but beneath it I see red. Stark red, Targaryen red, the color of blood mixing in the snow. I see a woman crying out in a tower. I see the swirl of laughter and tears at the birth of a child. Then darkness and a promise. Your father, Ned Stark, as you have always believed, knelt in that tower, but he was not your father by blood. Instead, he was the one who swore to keep you safe." She paused to watch Jon's face. She studied him the way a cat eyes a bird. "But you already suspect that, don't you?" Jon swallowed, knowing he had questioned his identity for some time now, but it was different to hear it spoken aloud in such a frank manner. "I have had glimpses," he admitted, voice hushed. "Dreams, maybe? They come when I least expect them, Ned Stark's voice echoing in my mind, and a woman's voice I do not know. They speak of a promise. A secret. Your father promised to protect the truth of your birth," Melisandre said. "You were born in the Tower of Joy, far to the south, where your mother drew her last breath. Lyanna Stark." She paused deliberately. "But what if the Lord of Light wills that she does not remain in the grave? What would you do if confronted by the very mother you never knew, living once again?" Jon's gut twisted as if a knife had been shoved between his ribs. Of all the things he had imagined, hearing about Lyanna Stark's possible return from the clutches of death was not one of them. The dead must rest, he thought, remembering how his own rebirth had felt like being wrested from a place beyond comfort, beyond pain. He remembered the numbness, the emptiness. Why would anyone attempt to bring back his mother buried for nearly 2 decades from the cold earth? That's impossible, he said through gritted teeth. I can't imagine. The Lord of Light's power is greater than you believe, Melisandre said, sliding a step closer. I have touched it, and I have seen it. I've tasted death, and my spirit soared with those who passed from this world. But he let me return so I might serve a higher cause. You have yourself been witness to his might. He stared down at his gloved hands, recalling how the ice in his veins had melted when life had been thrust back into him. He remembered the gasps of the onlookers, how Davos's eyes seemed ready to leap from their sockets with wonder. Everything he was now, he owed to Melisandre's dark conjurations. But to do this again, to commit a sacrilege that might be unnatural to the very order of life and death, he could not find his voice. She dipped her head, capturing his gaze. I see your fear. You question the wisdom and the horror of it. But the dead do not always rest easy when they have matters that remain unresolved. Your mother's death was cloaked in tragedy and hushes. If she could speak, imagine what truths might be uncovered. The realm itself might shift upon its axis. He thought of the White Walkers, the threat of the undead beyond the wall, the endless winter that threatened to devour all the living. Then he thought of Ned Stark, the man who had raised him with stern love and taught him honor. Would his father want such a thing? Would he keep the secret so diligently, only for Jon to become complicit in resurrecting Lyanna's body? Every fragment of him warred with every other. I must think on this, he said finally, turning to go. She did not stop him. As he descended from the ramparts back into the keep, the faint, unsettling taste of possibility clung to his tongue. Jon found that the corridors felt narrower than usual, as though the stone walls were pressing inward. Memories of his early life in Winterfell chased him with each echo of his boots on the floor. He remembered the days he'd played with Robb, how Sansa would watch them with half-concealed disdain whenever they got too rowdy, how Arya would beg to join them until she found some new mischief on her own. He remembered Bran climbing the walls. He remembered Ned's rueful smile whenever he had to break up a tussle between Jon and his siblings. Jon had always felt separate from them, a half-brother, a motherless child. But to think that somewhere in the crypts below lay the bones or ashes or dust of the woman who had given birth to him, the very same woman who had spurred 1,000 stories of her beauty, 1,000 regrets about the war that had consumed her. He went to the Godswood without even consciously deciding to do so. That place of quiet reflection had become his refuge. The heart tree, with its red leaves and solemn face carved into the weirwood, stared unblinking upon him. He knelt, placing his hand upon the root, and for a time he closed his eyes in prayer to the old gods, searching for guidance. The wind whispered among the branches, and faintly, he heard the quiet hush of ghosts past. There was no thunderous revelation, only the gentle flow of the weirwood's sap, the hush of wind on water, but somehow he felt calmer when he rose. Night fell in earnest, and a hush settled over Winterfell. The next morning, Melisandre was gone. She had left behind no word of farewell and no instructions. A horse had vanished from the stables, and some of the men had glimpsed the crimson swirl of her cloak darting out through the morning mist, but no one dared to follow. Jon's heart lurched at the news, uncertain whether to feel relief that her dangerous talk of resurrecting the past had vanished with her, or foreboding that she would return with something far more unsettling. He could sense her pulling at the threads of destiny like a spider, weaving some invisible web around him, the North, and the realm itself. Days stretched to weeks, and those weeks threatened to turn into months. In that time, Jon reigned in the North's various lords. They debated how best to deal with the Night King and his army of the dead. Lord Davos counseled caution and cunning, gathering dragonglass from wherever it could be found. Tormund Giantsbane, representing the free folk, pressed for forging alliances with every possible power, reminding them all that when the dead marched, the living must stand together or perish. Sansa, her face hardened by her experiences, cautioned Jon that war in the south might still come for them if they left their borders unguarded. The crows from King's Landing brought rumors of a queen wearing black and red, and whispers of dragons reborn. Everything hummed with tension, but amid it all, The question of Jon's heritage remained a quiet chord in the background, a chord that threatened to crescendo at any moment. No one had seen or heard from Melisandre, and Jon wondered whether that was a sign from the old gods that her plan was not meant to be. But one crisp morning, just as the courtyard was buzzing with the arrival of travelers seeking refuge, she reappeared. She came riding through the gates, her horse half dead from exhaustion, her scarlet cloak flapping behind her in the cold wind. Following her, in a cart driven by two silent men who wore scarves over their faces, was an object draped in a thick covering of fur and canvas. Jon watched from atop the steps as she dismounted. She looked older than before, even frail, as if the journey had drained her strength. "My lady," he said, forcing calm into his voice, "what have you done?" She flicked her gaze to the cart, and the men hopped down to untie the covering. As the fur slid away, Jon's heart lurched. Coffin. The wood was old, cracked, and bound with iron straps. Red sigils had been scrawled across its lid in a language he did not recognize. Looking upon it made him feel as though the world spun sideways. His breath caught in his throat. Melisandre took a moment, swaying slightly, before she lifted her chin, addressing him with a quiet fervor. "My king, I bring the Lady Lyanna Stark home. After many trials, I found the place where she had been entombed following the war. Her body was taken from the world and buried in secret, far from the crypts of Winterfell, so as not to provoke suspicion. With the blessings of the Lord of Light, I have brought her here to you." Whispers cascaded through the courtyard. Sansa, who had stepped out beside Jon, gasped. Davos muttered a string of curses under his breath. The gathered men of the north stared, some in confusion, others in horror. "We must bring her below," Melisandre insisted. "To the crypts. The resurrection must be performed near her ancestors' resting places, at least those of her father and brother. That is how the energies will be strongest." Jon's legs felt like lead. He forced himself to speak, though his throat felt painfully tight. "And you would do this for me?" he asked. "Is that what you claim?" He glanced at the coffin, recalling how he had lain motionless on a table after his murder until the Red Woman's incantations had jolted him back into the world of the living. "Why?" he asked, though the question reverberated with many unspoken meanings. "She will answer the question of your blood," Melisandre said, her voice trembling with fatigue. "And the living will need every truth if we are to stand united against the Great Other. There are powers woven into your lineage, Jon Snow powers the world will need. But first, we must break the shackles of the lie that has weighed upon you since birth. We do not have time to let secrets remain in the grave." He looked at Sansa, hoping to find some counsel in her expression. His sister's features were twisted with alarm and revulsion. "Jon," she whispered, "if there is some truth to what she says, we cannot turn our back on it. But I am afraid. This is dark, unnatural magic. You know what Davos told us. What the Red Woman did to others, all in the name of her lord." Jon nodded. He remembered how she had once demanded the sacrifice of Shireen Baratheon, Stannis' daughter, to feed her flames. He remembered the horror and grief that had cast Stannis' heart into darkness. Melisandre was capable of anything in the name of her god. And yet, Jon also remembered the moment he had first inhaled breath upon returning to life, the desperate relief that he would have another chance to protect the realm. "We can't decide this lightly," he told her. "If we refuse, she may well attempt her ritual alone. And if there is any chance that my mother could speak truth, we may need to hear it." Some of the Stark men transported the coffin to the entrance of the crypts. The people of Winterfell gathered at a distance, uncertain whether to watch in awe or run from something that felt too close to necromancy. Jon oversaw the unsealing of the iron straps. A pungent smell escaped, though not as foul as he might have feared. He glimpsed a shape wrapped in funerary cloth inside, and it made his heart clench. This was real. This was not a dream. Melisandre had gone to some cursed corner of the land to retrieve Lyanna Stark's remains and now meant to resurrect her. They carried the coffin into the crypts. Torches lit the rough-hewn corridors, which were lined with statues of Stark ancestors. Their stone eyes bore silent witness to the unfolding events. Melisandre directed them to place the coffin near the statue of Lyanna that had always stood there, a statue Ned Stark had commissioned in memory of the sister he had lost. The irony of seeing the stone figure and the real woman's remains side by side sent a chill through everyone present. Sansa held a torch, her face pallid but resolute. Davos hovered nearby, hands shaking on the hilt of a dagger he carried, as though half afraid something monstrous might emerge from the coffin. Tormund stood in the shadows, arms crossed, scowling. Jon took a breath and looked at Melisandre. What must be done? She knelt by the coffin, removing the cloth that covered Lyanna's wrapped body. The figure within was gaunt, bones and bits of leathery skin that had partially preserved in the dryness of wherever she had been laid to rest. The funeral wrappings had fused in places, and Melisandre gently tore them loose to reveal the remains of Lyanna Stark's face. Jon froze. There were no eyes left, only hollows, no flesh except thin, taut skin and patches of decayed muscle. His heart hammered at the horrifying sight, but at the same time he felt a surge of pity. This is my mother, some corner of his mind whispered. He had never known her in life, and now this was what he was left with. Melisandre withdrew an iron vial from a pouch at her belt and began dripping a thick, dark liquid onto the body's forehead, chanting softly in Valyrian or some other language he could not decipher. Her voice rose in slow crescendos, a lyrical lament that made the torches flicker. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting into shapes that almost seemed alive. The Red Woman spread the liquid in a pattern, painting symbols across the corpse's bare chest where the wrappings had been peeled away. The sight was gruesome, as though she painted runes on a shriveled tapestry. As she chanted, Jon felt a strange pressure building in the crypt, an almost physical force that compressed against his ribcage. His breathing grew shallow. He felt sweat bead on his forehead despite the cold air. Sansa's wide eyes flicked to him. Davos clutched the dagger, his lips parted as if praying. Even Tormund shifted uneasily, and a few of the men who had come to witness stepped back. The flame of the nearest torch trembled, then elongated in a sudden gust of wind that no one else seemed to feel. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and Melisandre extended her arms over Lyanna's body. Azor Hyzor Arhiller, she whispered, her voice cracking. Lalor de Ambus. Words that meant nothing to Jon, but still made his skin crawl. The pressure mounted. Then, so abruptly that it felt like a thunderclap, the torches went out. Someone screamed in the darkness. The crypt was plunged into blackness thick as tar. Jon reached for Longclaw at his hip, but only found the hilt and drew it out on reflex. Then, just as quickly as they had gone out, the torches reignited of their own accord with a rush of heat. Stunned gasps came from everyone present. Lyanna Stark's body twitched. It was a small movement, so slight Jon might have believed he'd imagined it if not for Sansa's strangled cry. A moment later, there was a second jerk, more forceful as the bony arms quivered. Melisandre's chanting slowed, her voice dropping to a trembling hush. She poured more of the dark liquid across Lyanna's chest, then pressed her hands to the corpse's forehead. An unearthly groan reverberated through the crypt. It sounded like the wind howling through a narrow pass, but it came from the mouth of the woman who had been dead for nearly 2 decades. Everyone shrank back except for Melisandre, whose eyes glowed with an uncanny fire. There was a harsh rattling breath as Lyanna's chest heaved. Her bones scraped against wrinkled ligaments. The face turned slowly, as if searching. Those empty eye sockets, ringed in scraps of dried tissue, fixated on Melisandre. A noise, half hiss and half wail, scraped through the air. Jon's heart hammered. He remembered his own return to life, that gulp of air that scalded his lungs, the confusion, the terror. But this was something else, something far more horrifying to witness. Melisandre gripped Lyanna's chin with both hands, her voice suddenly firm. She spoke in the common tongue, slowly, carefully. "Lady Lyanna," she said, "I call to you from beyond the veil. You died with words unspoken and truths kept hidden. I ask you to return to the realm of the living. Here stands your son, Jon Snow, who would know what you died to protect." That rattling hiss emerged again, and the corpse's mouth opened, revealing blackened teeth and a dark pit where a tongue should have been. The stench of the grave rolled out, forcing Jon to resist gagging. She reeked of earth and dust and the sweet rot of old death. Melisandre kept her hands steady, ignoring putrid odor. The tension in the crypts intensified as the resurrected body seemed to fight itself, its limbs jerking awkwardly as if pulled by invisible strings. Then, with a wet tearing sound, the eyes began to shift. The sockets bled a thick, dark fluid, and everyone recoiled. Except Melisandre. She continued her incantations, whispering fiercely, and in the wake of that slime, something took shape, sickly, unnatural orbs, milky and half-formed, sliding into place. A fresh moan came from Lyanna's throat, less ragged this time. The body's movements grew more controlled. Her chest shuddered with breath that should not be there. Davos swore under his breath, crossing himself. "Gods help us," he muttered. "This is an abomination." Jon was about to reply, but he could not tear his eyes away from the spectacle. This was his mother. This undead thing. He felt a wrenching in his chest. Was this what he had wanted? Was this the only way to know who he truly was? Finally, Lyanna's mouth moved again, this time forming something that resembled words. They came out broken and rasping, like the voice of wind rustling desiccated leaves. "You came for me," the thing that was Lyanna said. Melisandre nodded. "Yes, Lady Lyanna. We have brought you home. Your son, Jon, stands before you." She motioned to Jon, beckoning him forward. He stepped forward despite every instinct telling him to run. His heart pounded so fiercely it thundered in his ears. It felt like stepping into a nightmare or the darkest magic. He could sense sweat soaking his shirt beneath his furs and his mouth tasted of bile. But he went on until he stood at the coffin's edge, looking down into the milky eyes of this resurrected woman. The tension in the crypts was suffocating. For a moment, there was no sound but the corpse's labored breathing. Then those new eyes found Jon's face. She reached out a skeletal hand. He stared at it, horrified, but found himself lifting his own hand to meet hers. Her fingers closed around his wrist, unnaturally strong. The dried skin felt coarse, almost leathery. "Jon," she said in that broken rasp, tongue struggling to form words. "My child?" Tears stung at his eyes, though he fought them back. He had never heard his mother say his name. He had never heard her say anything. Now it was as though the entire world stood still in that moment. His lips parted, but no sound came out. In the flickering torchlight, the reunited mother and son stared at each other, separated by 20 years of death. Melisandre whispered, "Tell him what happened in the tower. Tell him about his father." Lyanna's breathing hitched, a tortured rise and fall of her ribcage. The tower," she paused as if searching her half-decayed mind for memory. "I was there," she whispered. "He took me. Rhaegar. I loved him. We were wed. Secretly. Our child. Mine. I was so afraid. So alone. Ned found me on my birthing bed. I begged him, promised me, keep safe." Sansa, who had inched closer, gasped. Davos let out a low curse. Tormund's eyes narrowed as if half-suspecting a trick. Jon stood transfixed, disbelief washing through him like a tidal wave. He had suspected Rhaegar Targaryen might be his father, but to hear it from the lips of Lyanna's reanimated body hammered the truth home with brutal force. Lyanna's voice broke as she spoke further. "My child. Prince of the blood. Song of ice and fire." The undead lips twitched into something like a tremor of sorrow. "I never meant for war. So many died. Robert could not forgive. Rhaegar's love for me." She paused, shuddering, then spoke again in a hoarse whisper. "Your name, your true name." "Aegon Targaryen." Jon nearly buckled at the pronouncement, his entire world shattering and reassembling in one breath. The crypt seemed to tilt. He was not just the bastard son of Ned Stark. He was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, and this dead woman, his mother, had named him Aegon. Everything he had known, every whisper of his identity, was undone. The hush in the crypts was absolute. Even the flames of the torches seemed to waver, as if uncertain how to respond to such a revelation. Lyanna's bony hand trembled against Jon's. The milky eyes flickered with an unsettling spark. "Ned, he protected you. Robert would have killed you if he knew." She coughed, a ragged sound echoing in her chest. "My child, you must unite them. Ice and fire." Jon felt a sob rising in his throat, though he fought to keep it at bay. Grief and pity warred with dread at this unholy sight. Yet he could not deny the surge of savage love that flared for the mother he had never known. She had risked everything to protect him. If she had loved Rhaegar, if they had truly married, then he was not the product of rape and kidnapping, as the tales claimed, but of something far more complicated. Lyanna's words hung in the air like the toll of a funeral bell. Melisandre maintained her stance, her scarlet robes swaying in an unfelt wind. "You have your answer now, Jon Snow or Aegon Targaryen. The realm needs you. Let your mother's resurrection be the harbinger of truth." Before she could continue, Lyanna's eyes rolled back and her body seized. A keening wail tore from her mouth, a sound of agony. Her limbs convulsed, rattling against the coffin's wooden sides. A fresh wave of that dark, foul fluid trickled from the corners of her eyes. Jon tried to hold her steady, but her strength was unnaturally formidable. The moan that erupted from her was inhuman, a shriek that rattled the statues lining the crypt. Melisandre rushed forward, chanting anew, but it seemed she had expended too much energy already. Her voice faltered. The symbol-laden fluids she poured onto Lyanna sizzled, but the glow that had once accompanied Jon's resurrection was absent. In the flickering torchlight, everyone watched in horror as the resurrected Lyanna Stark seemed to lose the tenuous grip she had on life. Her freshly formed eyes clouded over, her limbs twitching violently until they jerked to a horrifying stop. Her mouth fell open in a final rasping breath. In the oppressive silence, Jon realized she was gone. Tears finally broke free, streaking his cheeks. He gently lowered her bony hand onto her chest where the symbol-drawn fluids had smeared. Sansa knelt beside him, tears shining in her eyes as well. Even she, who had never known Lyanna, felt the stark agony of that final moment. Melisandre, looking pale and drained, leaned on the coffin for support. "The spirit that inhabits a corpse is tenuous," she murmured. "She gave you what she could, the truth." Then she turned her weary gaze on the watchers. "We must ensure her body is laid to rest properly in the crypts of her ancestors." A hush greeted that pronouncement, and Jon found himself unable to speak for a long moment. Finally, he cleared his throat, his voice rough. "She'll be laid to rest among the Starks as she deserved from the beginning." He swallowed, "And let the world hear her truth. I am Aegon Targaryen." Sansa placed her hand on Jon's shoulder, a gentle show of support despite the shock roiling within her. Davos approached, frowning but quiet. Tormund scratched his beard, looking vaguely uncomfortable. The other witnesses shifted uneasily as if they stood on uncertain ground. Some, no doubt, knew what the name Targaryen implied: fire and blood, dragons, madness. Others saw the king in the north as a living contradiction, a man they had crowned for his Stark blood, only to learn that half his blood was that of House Targaryen. They buried Lyanna properly in the crypt, returning the body to a restful state. Melisandre helped direct the final rites, sprinkling her with herbs and aromatic oils. Sansa covered Lyanna's face with a fresh linen cloth embroidered with the Stark sigil. Jon stood by, his emotions a tumult. He had heard the words from her own mouth: Rhaegar was his father, and his true name was Aegon. He had always felt like an outsider, but now he wondered, where did he truly belong? When it was done, and the crypt sealed, they emerged into the cold corridors of Winterfell. News spread quickly among the lords and ladies present in the castle. Those who had been present to witness the horrifying resurrection whispered of dark magic and ancient secrets. Jon had his own war council convened in the Great Hall. The lords of the north, many of them still battered from their recent wars, filed in with grim expressions. Sansa joined, sitting quietly to Jon's right. Davos stood to his left, face drawn. Tormund, one of the only representatives of the free folk, hovered near the back, arms crossed and jaw set. Melisandre was absent, recuperating in her chambers after her efforts. Silence gripped the assembly until Lord Glover, still nursing wounds from the battles against the Boltons, cleared his throat. "We hear rumors, my lord, my king," he corrected himself hastily. "They say you have a Targaryen heritage, that your father was Rhaegar himself." Jon did not flinch, though he felt the tension. He knew the North's history of bitterness toward the Targaryens, who had once burned the fathers of Lords Stark and Tully, among others, with dragonfire. "It's no rumor," he answered. "My mother was Lyanna Stark. My father was Rhaegar Targaryen. The truth has been hidden to protect me from Robert Baratheon, who would have seen me murdered for my blood." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some men looked at each other with worry. Others bristled in confusion or outright dismay. Lady Mormont, the young but fierce representative of Bear Island, rose to speak. "Then what does this mean for the North, your grace? We named you king in the North because you are a Stark son, Ned Stark's blood. Are you not still the same man we pledged to follow?" Jon inclined his head. "I am. My father, Ned Stark, raised me. He taught me everything I know about honor, loyalty, and justice. My mother was his sister, so I have Stark blood in me as well. The name on my birth is Targaryen, but I am still of the North. Nothing changes who I am or what I've fought for. My pledge to you stands firm. We face a threat greater than crowns or politics, the Night King and his army of the dead. I will fight with you to the bitter end for the survival of the living." A hush followed. Then, from the back, Lord Manderly's deep voice rumbled. "If the blood of the dragon runs in you, does that mean we now have a claim to alliance with Daenerys Targaryen, if she is who they say she is? Queen of the Dragons, so the rumors claim." Jon studied the speaker for a moment. "I have heard rumors that Daenerys Targaryen crossed the narrow sea with dragons. If she is truly Rhaegar's sister, then she would be my aunt. But I do not know her, nor do I know what she intends for the realm. We cannot be sure of her loyalty until we treat with her. At this moment, we must gather all possible allies against the Night King if we are to have any hope. Whether it's Targaryen, Lannister, or any other banner, we need unity." Some lords bristled at the mention of a Targaryen. Others looked thoughtful, perhaps sensing the potential of forging alliances. Lady Mormont again spoke. "Aye. Our real enemy is the one beyond the wall. As for your parentage, you have proven your loyalty to the North 100 times over. You took back Winterfell from the Boltons. You united us in the face of the White Walkers. I, for one, will not retract my support based on your father's name." A chorus of agreement and nods spread through the hall, though not everyone looked satisfied. Some lords clearly harbored deep-seated prejudices and fears. Jon knew this would not be an easy truth for them to accept, but for now they seemed willing to stand behind him for the sake of survival. Days passed and a fragile calm settled over Winterfell. Melisandre recovered from her ordeal, but she kept a low profile. Jon approached her once to question the nature of what she had done, but the Red Woman only responded with cryptic remarks about fate and prophecy. "Your mother gave you what you needed," she said. "Perhaps the Lord of Light intended only for that. I cannot say if he meant for her to walk the world anew or merely to speak her peace." Jon had no answer to that. He spent many hours brooding in the Godswood, wrestling with his newfound identity. More than once, he found Sansa there, kneeling in the snow beside him. Though their relationship had once been distant, the hardships they'd endured had drawn them together. One day, she ventured to speak the thoughts gnawing at her. "Does this change everything for you?" He shook his head slowly. "It changes a great deal in my mind, but not in my heart. I grew up as Ned Stark's son, believing myself a bastard. But the lessons he taught me remain the same. The vows I made, the convictions, the sense of loyalty to my people, they do not disappear. Only my name changes." She fiddled with a stray lock of her auburn hair. "And what will you do if the truth spreads beyond the north? If people realize you have a stronger claim to the Iron Throne than many who would try to sit upon it?" Jon frowned at that. "I do not want the Iron Throne. I don't want any throne, truly. If Daenerys Targaryen is in Westeros, she likely believes she's the rightful heir. War might brew between the South and the North if this is not handled carefully. But the only war that truly matters to me is the one against the White Walkers. Perhaps if she knows of my heritage, we can come to terms more easily." Sansa nodded, though a flicker of worry shadowed her expression. "We will need every ally we can muster, especially if winter grows harsher and the dead keep marching. The Umbers have already spoken of raids near the last hearth. They fear that the White Walkers aren't far off. Soon we may see them at our gates." An uneasy quiet passed between them, and Jon squeezed her hand. "We'll protect our people, Sansa. That is the promise we inherited from father, and from mother too in my case. Perhaps that's why she was brought back, so I would finally learn what I needed to know." Sansa offered a small, sad smile, then rose and departed. Jon remained under the heart tree, feeling the ancient trunk against his back. His mother, the woman who had loved a Targaryen prince, had died in that tower, leaving him a legacy of secrets and blood. He recalled the moment she had returned, that horrifying marionette of a body whispering truths in a voice like cracked parchment. His heart ached in ways he never thought it could. But he was oddly grateful, too. The woman he had yearned to know all his life had finally reached across the distance of death to give him the one thing he needed to face the future: certainty of who he was. Throughout Winterfell, the talk of Melisandre's deeds died down to a whisper. Most people were too consumed with fortifying the castle walls, stockpiling supplies, and preparing for the day the White Walkers would arrive. There was no forgetting the Great War that loomed on the horizon. Raven after raven brought tales of the chaos across the realm. The Ironborn fought amongst themselves. The Lannisters clung to power in King's Landing, or so it was said, while Cersei wore a crown. And Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen, had supposedly landed in Dragonstone, a small island fortress near the place where her ancestors first conquered Westeros. Jon found he could not ignore her. If she was truly the last Targaryen besides himself, then they were bound by blood, and if she had dragons, those creatures might be the key to defeating the White Walkers. He knew what it cost him to set aside old North-South grievances, but he had never been a man to cling to grudges or illusions. Ned Stark had taught him that alliances were built on trust and reason. He decided to send ravens to Dragonstone, requesting a meeting. Sansa was wary. Davos was more supportive, recognizing that meeting Daenerys could bring the advantage of her dragons into the war against the dead. Tormund, ever the wildling, simply shrugged and said if dragons could burn the dead, that was enough reason to treat with her. Melisandre, for her part, kept an enigmatic smile and offered no direct counsel, but she did mention that prophecy spoke of a Targaryen uniting the realm against the darkness. That might be Daenerys. It might be Jon. Perhaps both. As plans took shape, Jon wrestled with a new, unnerving thought. Could the truth of his parentage fracture the fragile unity of the North if the Southern lords sought to crown him in King's Landing? He could already imagine how uneasy the Northern lords might feel if they believed he would abandon them for the South. That was not his intention, but rumor and ambition had ways of poisoning alliances. He would need to tread carefully. Perhaps he would keep the truth to a small circle until the threat of the White Walkers was dealt with. Several days later, Melisandre found him alone in Winterfell's library, poring over old scrolls about the last long night. Stacks of parchment cluttered the wooden table where a single candle burned, flickering shadows across the old texts. He looked up to see her standing there, her expression strangely solemn. "The revelation has shaken you," she observed. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'm not sure I needed you to raise my mother from the dead just to confirm it. I dreamed of meeting her, but not in that way. Yet I suppose it was the only way." There was a bittersweetness in his words, a longing for something lost forever. Melisandre inclined her head. "Death is not kind, Jon Snow. Even when we return, some part of us remains with the shadows. She gave you what she could. The truth is a sword of its own, is it not?" He nodded, setting aside a scroll that described how the first men fought against the White Walkers with dragonsteel. "It is. I feel as though I hold a blade that can't be sheathed. If I proclaim myself Aegon Targaryen, some will follow me gladly. Others will turn against me. Yet if I hide it, I betray who I am. I do not know what to do." She moved around the table, her robes rustling softly. "The Lord of Light does not provide easy answers, only the flame to guide us. It is you who must decide how to walk your path. You have found the truth of your parentage. Now you must use it or set it aside for the greater war. The darkness is coming. You must be ready." Jon exhaled, glancing at the candle flame. "Do you see anything else in the fire? Any more glimpses?" She studied him in silence, then shook her head. "My visions have been clouded since I resurrected your mother. Sometimes the Lord's light dims when we venture into the darkness unbidden. I suspect we will see no more clarity until you stand face to face with your destiny." He gave a small, mirthless chuckle. "That is vague and unhelpful, my lady." Her voice softened. "Prophecy is rarely a comfort, Jon Snow." Then she turned and left him to his studies. Time pressed on. As the nights grew longer and colder, it seemed the uneasy lull before a storm. A raven arrived from Dragonstone, bearing Daenerys Targaryen's seal. She invited Jon to bend the knee, offering amnesty and friendship in exchange for fealty. While the letter was couched in polite language, its meaning was clear. She considered herself the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. The lines about forging alliances to defeat the Night King were overshadowed by her expectation that all those who had sworn themselves kings must abandon their crowns. Jon read the letter in silence, his face set. Then he looked to Sansa, to Davos, and to the other advisors gathered in the Great Hall. "She wants me to come to Dragonstone and bend the knee. She says she has dragons and a army of Unsullied, Dothraki, and the backing of powerful lords. She also says she believes in the threat of the dead, but she requires my fealty before she'll lend her might." Lord Glover made a disapproving sound. "So the Targaryen queen demands we bend the knee? The North is done bending, last I checked." Sansa's eyes slid to Jon, carefully assessing. "If what we hear of her dragons is true, then her power could be immense. The question is, do you go to her as Jon Snow, king in the North, or do you reveal your lineage as Aegon Targaryen?" A hush followed. Davos leaned in. A Targaryen might have more luck winning her favor, but it might also be seen as a threat. She might fear you could stake a stronger claim to the Iron Throne. The histories tell us how rival Targaryens contested inheritance, leading to the Dance of the Dragons. It's a risk. Jon blew out a breath, the weight of it pressing on him from every side. If we do not ally, the White Walkers could destroy us all. None of us can stand alone. But if I openly proclaim myself a Targaryen, who knows how she will react? Let alone the North. Let alone the rest of Westeros. He paused, recalling the dead lips of Lyanna Stark forming the words that gave him his name. Yet how can I deny the truth my own mother died to protect? He felt the watchful gaze of many in the hall. Some lords looked uneasy. Sansa spoke carefully. "Do you think we can trust her? If she has proven she is not her father's daughter, meaning she does not share the Mad King's cruelty, then perhaps an alliance is possible. But what if she sees you as a rival?" Jon flexed his jaw. "Then so be it. I will go, but not alone. I'll take Davos and a small guard. We will make our intentions clear. We are here to seek her help against the Night King. What I do about my parentage, I'll decide if the moment arises." That night, he stood once more in the Godwood where the snow had piled up in drifts. The red leaves of the weirwood glistened in the moonlight like blood-stained tears. He thought of Ned Stark's unwavering gaze, the father who had lied to everyone, including his wife, just to protect Lyanna's child. He thought of Lyanna's reanimated voice, calling him her child, naming him Aegon Targaryen. For a moment, anger flared. Could his life not be simple? Could the realm not allow him a moment's peace? No. The gods seldom granted peace in times of war. Prophecy, lineage, destiny, they had all caught up to him. His breath was visible in the cold air, and he found himself whispering to the old gods or perhaps to Lyanna's spirit. I will do what I must. For my people. For the living. I hope I make you proud, mother. He closed his eyes. In his mind's eye, he saw the image of a ghostly figure with stark gray eyes, touched with sorrow and love. Perhaps it was just his imagination. The following dawn, plans were set. Jon named Sansa as regent in the north while he traveled south to meet this dragon queen. Some lords complained, but it was the only way. Melisandre stood in the courtyard, watching in silence as the party mounted up. She offered only a few words to Jon. Be wary. The south is full of cunning whispers and truth is often a double-edged blade. But do not shirk from destiny. Jon thanked her curtly and swung into his saddle. He looked up at the walls of Winterfell one last time, the memory of Lyanna Stark's crypt calling to him like a distant bell. She had revealed his truth and cast him into a greater unknown. But at least now he knew who he was, and for better or worse, that gave him a sense of clarity. When the horns sounded, he and his retinue departed under the dire wolf banners flapping in the morning breeze. The road south felt long and strangely unreal. The winter storms had turned the King's Road into a treacherous route covered with black ice in places. Yet, they made their way diligently, meeting travelers who brought news of the realm's chaos, river lords swearing fealty to Queen Daenerys, other houses hesitating to commit. Some reported that the Lannisters had sent envoys to treat with the Dragon Queen as well, perhaps hoping to avoid utter destruction by her dragons. The realm was on the brink of a new order, yet still so blind to the real menace lurking beyond the wall. At Moat Cailin, Jon paused to gaze upon the ancient ruins that once guarded the north. He remembered passing this way many times, but never with a sense that the entire future of Westeros might hinge on his decisions. Davos, ever the loyal counselor, approached. You've been quiet these last days. Do you regret what was done in Winterfell? The resurrection, I mean. Jon's face revealed a flicker of pain. I don't know. Part of me wishes I'd never known the truth, that I could go on believing I was Ned Stark's bastard. Life was simpler then. Davos gave a small smile. Well, I've lived a life of few illusions and many mistakes. In my experience, truth is rarely kind, but it's still better than living a lie. A ghost of a smile touched Jon's lips. I suppose you're right. He spurred his horse onward, the wind whipping at his cloak. Their journey continued in relative unease. Every camp at night found Jon wrestling with his thoughts as he stared into the campfire, remembering how the flames flickered the night Melisandre called him back from death and then again the day she pulled Lyanna Stark from the grave. He dreamt of an empty tower where he heard a woman's voice calling his name. Aegon! Aegon, over and over until he woke in a cold sweat. When they finally reached the neck and pushed beyond, the weather grew marginally milder, though a chill still haunted the air. They passed small villages, farmland that had lain fallow since the war ravaged the riverlands. The people they encountered looked worn, hungry, and fearful. News of dragons in the sky spread like wildfire, accompanied by rumors that Daenerys had sacked Lannister troops. The realm trembled under shifting powers. And still, the White Walkers approached from the north, unstoppable. Davos tried to bolster Jon's spirits. With any luck, this Dragon Queen will see reason. If not, we'll show her whites or the dragonglass you've brought along so she'll know the threat is real. Maybe she'll see sense, especially if you reveal your Targaryen blood. She might see you as kin. Jon frowned, reining in his horse. Or as a threat, he reminded gently. But we'll find a way. We have to. The final leg of the journey took them along the coast where they glimpsed the rocky island of Dragonstone in the distance. It loomed, dark and jagged, in a mist of sea spray. Waves battered the cliffs and gulls circled overhead, their cries echoing across the water. Jon had arranged for a small boat to ferry him and his closest companions across to the fortress. The rest of his guard would wait on the mainland, ready to come if summoned. Standing on the deck of a small ship, he felt a curious sense of déjà vu, though he had never been to Dragonstone. He wondered if something in his Targaryen blood reacted to the sight of the ancient citadel from which Aegon the Conqueror had launched his campaign to unite Westeros under the Iron Throne. A fortress of black stone rose against the sky, carved into fantastical shapes reminiscent of dragons. Davos pointed out the winding steps that led to the gates where Targaryen banners now hung, black and red. Jon took a measured breath. Well, here we are. One step closer to the truth I never asked for. Davos rested a hand on Jon's shoulder. Sometimes, my lord, or, well, my king, that is all we can do, keep walking forward no matter how uncertain the path. Jon offered a tight nod, remembering the words of his mother's resurrected spirit. Unite them. Ice and fire. He had spent his life feeling like ice, cold, reserved, a bastard from the north. Now he realized the fire in his veins was as true as the ice. Could he truly unite them? Or was the realm doomed to break before the might of the undead? He squared his shoulders. The boat struck the shore, rocking in the tide. Their party disembarked, water lapping around their boots. Ahead, the winding steps awaited, climbing into the gloom of the fortress. Guards wearing the sigil of the three-headed dragon approached. The time had come. Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, steeled himself. Whether Daenerys welcomed him as kin or rival, he would not lose sight of the war that mattered. In the faint rush of the ocean wind, he thought he could almost hear Lyanna's voice. My child, unite them. The memory of her final, rasping words stirred his heart with both sorrow and resolve. He thought of how she had reached for him in that crypt, fighting through death to reveal the truth. He had to honor that legacy, to do right by her, by Ned, by all those who had sacrificed their lives to bring him to this moment. As he ascended the steps of Dragonstone, each footfall felt like a drumbeat, heralding a future that was yet unwritten. Ice and fire, swirling together into a destiny that was larger than any crown. And though he was afraid, he drew strength from the knowledge that he was not alone. Every lesson from the north, every sacrifice, every memory, he carried them within him. The ghost of Lyanna Stark, too, dwelled in his heart, reminding him that love could change the course of history and secrets once buried could reshape the fate of kingdoms. At the top of the stairs, where the gates of Dragonstone stood open beneath the Targaryen sigil, Jon paused. The salty air whipped his cloak around his legs, and for just a moment the sun broke through the clouds above, painting the black stone in a wash of pale gold. If this was the path the gods had set before him, he would walk it. He let out a long breath, glancing at Davos, who nodded in quiet solidarity. Then, with resolve burning in his veins, Jon Snow stepped forward, prepared to meet the Dragon Queen, prepared, at last, to face the truth of his blood. The guards at the gates to Dragonstone wore dark leather and steel, their crimson cloaks emblazoned with the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. They stood erect, spears in hand, gazes combing over Jon Snow and his small retinue. At Davos's side, two northern guards shifted uneasily, aware that they stood at the doorstep of an ancient seat, one that belonged to Targaryens since Aegon the Conqueror first touched Westerosi shores. A swirl of salt wind ruffled everyone's cloaks, and the crashing waves below filled the silence as one of the Targaryen guards signaled them to proceed. Jon lifted his chin, silently reminding himself of the gravity of this meeting. Daenerys Targaryen, so the rumors said, had assembled the mightiest forces seen since the days of old Valyria. 3 dragons soared above these skies. Unsullied and Dothraki warriors filled her ranks. She had named herself the rightful queen of the 7 kingdoms. Yet, ironically, the man who approached her, Jon, bore Targaryen blood as well, or so Lyanna Stark had revealed with her final, rasping breath. Even if he did not yet openly carry the name Aegon Targaryen, he felt it burning like a brand in his mind. He and Davos followed the guards up a winding walkway of worn stone that led deeper into the castle's courtyard. It was a fortress shaped by centuries of Targaryen rule, its walls carved in strange patterns of dragon scales, its gargoyles shaped like twisted serpents and winged beasts. The wind curled around them, forcing them to lean forward. Davos gave Jon a sidelong glance that seemed to say, "Careful now." Jon nodded imperceptibly, praying that this new queen would hear reason, praying that the truth of the White Walkers would matter more to her than crowns. At last, they reached an ornate set of doors. Melisandre of Noth waited there, flanked by 2 Unsullied wearing plain steel helms and rigid expressions. Melisandre inclined her head politely. "My queen awaits you in the throne room, my lord," she said. Her tone was warm but measured, and her gaze flicked over each of them. "If you would leave your weapons, please?" Jon hesitated. He remembered how Melisandre had once told him that prophecies rarely arrived with comfort and ease. He had no illusions that Daenerys Targaryen could be fully trusted right away, but then if he was to ask for her help, he had to show some willingness to rely on her hospitality. With a nod, he relinquished Longclaw, ignoring the alarm that prickled his instincts at giving up his Valyrian steel blade. Davos handed over the short sword at his side, the Northmen followed suit, and the Unsullied stepped forward to place the weapons in a rack. Only then did Melisandre gesture them inside. The throne room was cavernous, the walls etched in draconic motifs that seemed to dance in the torchlight. At the far end, upon an elevated dais, sat Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. She wore a dark gown with a high collar, her silver-gold hair styled in intricate braids. Beside her stood Tyrion Lannister, the hand of the queen, short of stature but tall in reputation. Grey Worm and a handful of other loyal captains hovered near the edges of the chamber. All eyes fell on Jon as the heavy doors groaned shut behind him. Daenerys regarded Jon with a calm, deliberate stare. She did not speak immediately, letting the hush stretch out until it began to throb. Finally, she rose from her seat, her voice resonant and firm. "Thank you for answering my invitation, King in the North. I am Daenerys Targaryen. I am the last surviving child of Aerys II and rightful heir to the Iron Throne." She paused, her gaze raking across the small group. "I have been told you have come seeking an alliance against a threat in the far north. One that you say supersedes any rivalry or claim to the throne. Tell me more about these White Walkers." Jon exchanged a quick look with Davos. "I come to ask for your help," he said, stepping forward, "not to challenge your right to name yourself queen. The threat is real. An army of the dead marches on the realm. They will not stop until all the living have fallen." Daenerys' eyes narrowed slightly, but she did not mock him. Perhaps she had heard enough rumors already of Whites of the Night King to keep from dismissing his words outright. Tyrion cleared his throat and spoke up. "I've heard many a strange tale from the north in my day, Jon Snow. Though I've never known you to be the sort to spin falsehoods. But are you truly convinced this threat is imminent? There are those who say White Walkers are children's stories, little more." Jon suppressed a surge of frustration. He had endured enough disbelief at the Wall and beyond. "I've fought them," he said simply. "I've seen them raise the dead, kill good men, break entire armies. The Wall has held for thousands of years, but it won't hold forever. I've come here because we need allies to stand against them. We need dragonglass and perhaps the power of your dragons. You can help us win the only war that matters." Daenerys studied him, expression unreadable. "Your father, Ned Stark, rose in rebellion against mine. He helped Robert Baratheon take my family's throne. And yet here you are. You claim you do not seek the Iron Throne, only an alliance. My father was called the Mad King for a reason, though I did not know him. Still, the wars that followed left my house in ruin. Why should I trust the son of a man who fought to destroy my family?" Jon found his pulse quickening. She, like so many others, believed Ned Stark to be his father. The memory of Lyanna's reanimated body tugged at him with a painful twist. For now, he kept the revelation of his Targaryen blood behind his teeth. He did not believe this was the moment to unveil that truth. "I understand that you have no reason to trust me," Jon answered. "But I offer the truth. We do not have time for squabbles. Bend the knee, break the wheel. Any of it becomes meaningless if the White Walkers overrun the north and keep marching south." She regarded him in silence. Then her gaze flickered to Davos as though gauging him as well. "Your companion, Ser Davos Seaworth, served Stannis Baratheon, did he not? And Stannis also declared himself king, an enemy of my claim. Yet here you stand under another banner. You speak of an imminent doom, but you all have changed loyalties in the past. Perhaps you will again." Davos bristled slightly but maintained a respectful tone. "My lady, or your grace, the world is not as it was. We've all changed loyalties out of necessity. Stannis fought to claim the Iron Throne. We're fighting for the survival of the living. That's a war unlike any other. Believe us or not, but if we fail, there won't be enough men left to bend any knees at all." There was a long, weighted pause. Tyrion tapped his fingers together, his brow furrowed in thought. Then he turned to Daenerys. "Your Grace, they have risked much to come here. If these White Walkers are real, and from all I've heard of Jon Snow, I doubt he's the sort to conjure elaborate lies, then ignoring them could prove disastrous. You wish to break the wheel. Perhaps forging an alliance with the North is a wiser step toward that end." Daenerys' features softened an inch. She resumed her seat on the throne, a silhouette of dark elegance. "I am not my father," she said quietly. "I will not burn innocence for the sake of madness. But I must also be certain of the truth. If I choose to lend you my strength, I will expect loyalty in return." Jon inclined his head, considering how to frame his answer. "I've come as the king in the north, chosen by our people. They follow me because they trust me to protect them, not because they want to wage war on you or any other would-be monarch. We are free men and women, but we will stand with those who stand with us against the dead." She breathed out, and for a moment, something akin to compassion flickered in her violet eyes. "I have seen horrors across the narrow sea. Slavers who believed they were untouchable, armies that ravaged lands in the name of power. If these White Walkers are, as you say, then they are an even greater horror. My dragons are not weapons to be bartered lightly. But neither do I wish to see the living consumed by an undead tide. If you have any proof of their existence, it would help quell the doubts of my council." Jon and Davos exchanged looks, frustration etched on their faces. "I can show you the dragon glass on Dragonstone," Jon said, forging onward. "That alone is valuable in fighting them. But to offer undeniable proof, I would need to capture a white and bring it to you, or bring it to others so that no one can deny the truth. But that's dangerous, and it would cost time we may not have." Daenerys exhaled. "Then we must act swiftly. But there's another matter. While the Night King might be the greatest threat, I still have the war in the south to consider. Cersei Lannister holds the Iron Throne in King's Landing, and she will not yield without bloodshed. If I divert my forces north, I leave myself vulnerable to Lannister retaliation. My allies might question the wisdom of that choice." Tyrion nodded gravely. "We must tread carefully, Your Grace. A war on two fronts rarely ends well, especially with so many uncertainties. But the threat in the north does not care for our politics." Jon felt tension coiling in his gut. "Then help me gather allies and help me gather dragonglass to arm the north. Send your dragons to harass the dead, or at least keep watch from the skies. If the army of the dead emerges, your forces might turn the tide. But do not wait too long. The dead grow stronger by the day." Daenerys steepled her fingers together. "I will consider what you've said. In the meantime, you are welcome as my guest here on Dragonstone. Tyrion will see to your accommodations and discuss the practicalities of mining dragonglass. I'd like you to remain while I consult with my advisors." Her tone suggested that the discussion was at a pause, if not its end. Jon bowed his head in acceptance. He wanted to push further, but he sensed that pressing her now might do more harm than good. Davos seemed to share that instinct. He offered a polite bow, and then they retreated under the watchful gazes of Grey Worm and the others. As Jon turned to go, he felt Daenerys' eyes follow him, as though she were weighing every nuance of his presence. Outside in the corridor, the sea wind cut through narrow windows, making the torches flutter. Tyrion hurried after them, his footsteps echoing. "Jon," he said, voice pitched low. "A word, if you will." Jon halted, letting Davos and the northern men walk on. Tyrion guided Jon into a small alcove away from curious ears. "That went better than it could have," Tyrion said. "But make no mistake, Daenerys won't simply hand over her armies to the north. If you won't bend the knee, you must offer her something else, convincing proof of this threat, or a reason that benefits her cause." Jon kept his voice controlled. "I understand. Believe me, I've dealt with enough lords who demanded fealty before offering any help. But this isn't about me being king or her being queen. It's about survival." Tyrion folded his hands behind his back. "I know that's how you see it, and I even believe you. That's why I'll do what I can to help. I've told Daenerys that you're no liar or schemer. She respects my counsel, but in the end, her decisions are her own. Try not to be too proud or too prickly if she pushes you to yield." Jon swallowed. He recalled the weight of secrets pressing on him. Part of him wanted to blurt out that he was also a Targaryen, that their families were bound by blood. Another part cautioned that revealing such a thing without preparation could throw the entire alliance into chaos. "I'll keep that in mind. Thank you." Tyrion nodded, a flicker of sympathy in his mismatched eyes. "I'll have someone show you to your chambers. We'll talk again soon." Jon trudged down the corridor, lost in thought, until Davos rejoined him. The Onion Knight's expression was pensive. "She didn't command you to bend the knee outright, lad," Davos observed quietly. "But she didn't throw open the gates either." Jon exhaled, glancing at the rough stone walls decorated with carved dragons. "She's a Targaryen who believes she was born to rule," he said. "And yet she's also freed thousands from slavery. She might be merciful, or at least pragmatic enough to consider an alliance. We'll have to prove ourselves. The question is, how much time do we have before the dead break through the wall?" They reached the quarters assigned to them, modest rooms overlooking the churning sea. After settling in, Jon tried to banish his tension by taking a walk along the castle ramparts. Sharp cliffs dropped away to the rocks below. The wind howled, carrying a briny spray. He could almost sense the ancient power thrumming in the black stone beneath his feet. This was the seat of House Targaryen, from which Aegon the Conqueror had once launched his campaign. And here he was, a man unknowingly named for that very conqueror, the blood of the dragon hidden beneath a Stark's face. That night, dinner was a subdued affair in a smaller hall. Daenerys did not attend, leaving Tyrion to host the northern guests. The Lannister made conversation about the war in the south, about the alliances Daenerys had begun to forge. Grey Worm sat silently, occasionally glancing at Melisandre, who offered only polite remarks. Davos tried to lighten the mood with a few jokes, but even that could not dispel the sense of tension. Jon ate sparingly, mind too caught up in worry to savor the meal. When at last he retired for the night, he found sleep elusive. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw a swirl of visions: the stony face of Lyanna in the crypt, the White Walkers advancing with silent malice, and dragons breathing fire over a scorched battlefield. At some point near dawn, he drifted into a restless doze, only to awaken to a knock at the door. He stumbled to open it, finding Tyrion standing there with a grim cast to his features. "Jon, we need you in the map room. It seems we have developments from our scouts." Jon quickly dressed and followed him through the twisting corridors until they entered a large chamber dominated by a carved table shaped like Westeros, rumored to be the same table Aegon had used to plan his conquest. Daenerys stood on the far side, leaning over a portion of the map that depicted the Crownlands and the north. Her face was taut with concern, her silver-gold hair brushed back from her temples. Varys stood near her, his expression carefully neutral. Daenerys glanced at Jon. "We've received word that the Lannister army marched to Highgarden and defeated House Tyrell more swiftly than anticipated. Now they've secured the Tyrell gold for Cersei's war chest. That means an assault on King's Landing might be more difficult than we planned, as the Lannisters have greater resources." Jon knew precious little about the specifics of Daenerys' southern campaign, but he understood that a setback here might harden Daenerys' resolve to escalate hostilities and potentially delay any help to the north. "I'm sorry to hear that," he offered guardedly. "Does this mean your war will draw out longer?" Daenerys' jaw tightened. "Possibly. Tyrion advised a more cautious approach to avoid incinerating King's Landing, but we've already lost Dorne's fleet and now the Tyrells. I'm left with the Unsullied isolated at Casterly Rock. We must reconsider our next move before Cersei grows even bolder." She paused, then looked directly at him. "I will not forget the threat you spoke of, Jon Snow. But if the Lannisters crush my forces, there will be no chance to aid you. I cannot let that happen." A frustrated knot lodged in Jon's stomach. He understood her predicament. She was close to claiming the Iron Throne and believed that seat would help her bring peace to Westeros. But every day spent fighting in the south was another day the White Walkers might march on an unprepared north. "War is never simple," he said. "But if winter comes full force and the dead cross the wall, you'll face an enemy far worse than any Lannister. We need to mine Dragoglass immediately, at the very least, so my people can start forging weapons." Daenerys nodded slowly. "Yes, Tyrion and I have discussed it. We'll allow you to mine the Dragoglass beneath Dragonstone. My men can show you where. And I can spare a few men to help, though not many." She lifted her chin, a flicker of steel in her gaze. "In return, I ask you to accept me as your rightful queen. Bend the knee, Jon Snow. Let us stand united under one banner, as the Targaryens and Starks once did when they fought side by side." Silence pressed in. Jon felt everyone's eyes upon him. Davos stood near the door, his weathered face a mask of apprehension. Varys' expression was unreadable, but Tyrion looked tense, as if he dreaded the confrontation. Jon breathed in, measuring his response. "I came here to save lives, not to carve out a crown for myself. But the North only crowned me because they were desperate for a leader who'd protect them. If I bend the knee now, they might question whether they chose wrongly, whether I'm sacrificing them to Southern ambitions. My loyalty must remain to them first. I cannot simply discard what they have entrusted to me." Daenerys exhaled a quiet sigh, her tone turning brisk. "And my loyalty is to my own cause and to the people I mean to free from tyrants like Cersei Lannister. If we are to have an alliance, we must find a path forward without endless stalemate." It was Tyrion who spoke next, an edge of exasperation in his voice. "Would you two set aside the question of kneeling for a moment and focus on how you can move forward practically? We can mine the Dragoglass now and equip the North with enough weapons to face the threat. In the meantime, Your Grace, you can continue planning your campaign against the Lannisters without ignoring what Jon Snow has told us. We gain nothing by forcing an immediate oath of fealty." Daenerys' gaze flicked between Tyrion and Jon. "Very well," she relented quietly. "We will postpone this question. For now, begin your mining. Take what you need, but do not vanish into the night. Remain here, so I know you do not betray me." "Agreed." Jon inclined his head, voice calm. "Agreed." The tension eased slightly. Over the next weeks, the caverns beneath Dragonstone became a constant hub of activity. Daenerys assigned a handful of her men to assist, mostly those who had no place in her immediate military strategies. Jon oversaw the mining operation personally. descending into the rocky depths where veins of obsidian glimmered under torchlight. The northern guards who accompanied him labored with pickaxes, chipping away the dark glass. Davos, for his part, watched from the sidelines, calculating how many crates could be loaded for shipment to Winterfell. It was in those dimly lit caverns, black rock shining under flickers of flame, that Daenerys herself one day arrived unannounced. She wore practical boots and a cloak pinned over her shoulders, stepping lightly on the uneven ground. Jon turned from the newly exposed vein of dragonglass, slightly startled to see her alone. He wondered if she had come to monitor him or if curiosity had simply drawn her here. "It's beautiful," Daenerys remarked, running her hand over the shimmering wall of obsidian. "Deadly, but beautiful. My ancestors knew of this rock's power. They used it when forging weapons long ago. So many secrets hidden beneath our feet." Jon laid down his pickaxe. "I believe dragonglass can kill White Walkers. It's one of the few substances that can. The rest is Valyrian steel, and that's rare. We'll need as much as we can carry." He paused, unable to shake the memory of the army of the dead. "We may need it sooner than we think." She turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Tyrion told me you died once, that you took a knife in the heart for your men. Is that true? Or is it another campfire tale meant to frighten children?" Jon's heart stuttered for a moment. He recalled his murder at the hands of the mutineers, the icy void of death, and the blazing shock of returning. It still felt unreal sometimes. "It's true," he said quietly. "I was murdered by my own brothers of the Night's Watch. They didn't agree with my decisions regarding the Free Folk. Melisandre. She brought me back." Daenerys studied him as one might study a curious painting. "Brought you back from the dead. Strange how we both owe something to magic, then. I have no children but my dragons. You have no reason to be alive, yet here you stand." Her gaze flicked over him. "You speak of an enemy who can raise the dead. Perhaps this is the world we now live in, where the lines between life and death blur." Jon found himself unsettled by her words. She was not mocking him. Rather, she spoke with a quiet seriousness that suggested her mind reeled from the revelations. He swallowed. "I can't explain it. Perhaps the Lord of Light has plans for me, or for all of us. But if I was spared, it must be to fight what's coming." She regarded him, arms loosely crossed over her chest, the faint glow of torchlight catching in her eyes. "Then let's hope your faith proves well-founded. We will need all the help we can get." A moment later, her guarded demeanor returned. "Continue mining. I'll see that ships are prepared to send what's gathered north." She departed, leaving Jon with a mixture of relief and lingering tension. They were not allies in the truest sense yet, but at least she was helping with the obsidian. As the days wore on, the stockpile of dragonglass grew. Crates were filled, sealed, and lugged up the winding steps to be stowed in the castle's storerooms until they could be shipped. Word arrived in the midst of this that the Unsullied had seized Casterly Rock only to find it near empty, as Jaime Lannister had marched the bulk of his forces to Highgarden. It was a cunning feint that left Daenerys's ground forces stranded and short on supplies. The Queen, furious at being outmaneuvered, considered unleashing her dragons on the Lannister army. Tyrion counseled restraint, but Daenerys's frustration deepened. She summoned her Dothraki riders and mounted Drogon. In a stunning blow, she ambushed the Lannister caravan returning from Highgarden. Reports flew back to Dragonstone that she had turned the battlefield into a sea of fire, incinerating wagons and forcing the Lannisters to flee. Many hailed it as a triumphant show of her dragon's might. Others whispered concerns about the image of a Targaryen burning foes alive. Jon took in the news quietly. He understood the game of war was harsh, yet every day spent in these battles threatened to overshadow the conflict in the north. The White Walkers didn't care who sat on the Iron Throne. After some deliberation, he resolved to speak plainly to Daenerys yet again, if only to remind her that for all her victories, time slipped through their fingers like sand. He found her in the courtyard, stroking Drogon's scaled neck after the beast had landed, its wings stirring the dust. The monstrous creature bared its teeth at Jon's approach, exhaling a warm, sulfuric breath. Jon felt his heart clench. He'd never been so close to a living dragon. Yet, to his astonishment, Drogon did not lunge, merely glowered. Daenerys moved her palm in a soothing pattern, cooing softly to the creature in High Valyrian until it settled. She turned, eyes shining, her face bright with the afterglow of battle. "There is nothing like flying a dragon into war," she said quietly. "It's power, but it's also a reminder that these creatures are not to be used lightly." Jon let out a breath. "You won a great victory from what I hear. The Lannisters won't soon forget the sight of your dragon." Daenerys' expression was fierce, though not without a hint of conflict. "I did what I had to do. Otherwise, Cersei might have bled the Reach dry and used that gold to finance a long war." Then, in a lower tone, she added, "Tyrion worries that the more I use my dragons, the more people will see me as the Mad King's daughter. But the truth is, without them, I may lose everything before the real war even begins." Jon nodded. "I don't condemn you for using the power at your disposal. I only ask that you remember we'll need that power in the north. Every battle you fight in the south is a risk. We must be prepared for the White Walkers." She lifted her chin. "I haven't forgotten. The Dragonglass shipments will begin soon. I intend to do more than that, Jon Snow, if you give me a reason." Her words hung in the air, a pointed reminder of her earlier demand that he bend the knee. But she did not voice it outright. Instead, she raised a hand to Drogon, speaking a word in Valyrian. The great dragon ruffled its wings, then unfurled them wide, launching into the sky with a mighty roar. Jon watched Drogon climb into the clouds, a streak of black and red. The power on display was undeniable, and it belonged to Daenerys. If she agreed to send her dragons north, they might stand a chance against the dead. But how many more southern battles would drain her resources before that day came? He held his tongue. Now was not the moment to press the matter. She had at least committed to sending Dragonglass. Perhaps that was enough for the present. A letter arrived from Winterfell, carried by a Stark courier who had traveled hard. Jon recognized Sansa's hand at once, scanning the words with a mix of relief and alarm. The letter spoke of tension among the northern lords. Some questioned why their king had gone south for so long, leaving Sansa to rule in his stead. Others doubted the existence of the White Walkers and grumbled that Jon was chasing fairy tales. Worse, there were sightings of undead creatures near the last hearth, though scattered and unconfirmed. The letter ended with a plea. The North needed reassurance that its king was taking action to protect them. Jon felt guilt coil in his stomach. He had accomplished some of his aims at Dragonstone, securing the Dragonglass, but everything else was uncertain. He paced his chamber with Davos standing by. "I need to return to Winterfell," Jon muttered. "The North is uneasy. The threat grows daily." Davos stroked his beard. "Aye, you do. But if you leave now, you risk alienating the Queen. She might think you've spurned her. She still hasn't committed her full might to the cause." Jon set the parchment on a table, exhaling. "I can't wait indefinitely. The lords are anxious and I promise to protect them. If I remain here, I leave Sansa alone to handle their frustrations, and if the White Walkers truly push south, the realm will be in chaos before Daenerys finishes her war." Davos nodded. "We might at least speak with her. See if there's a formal arrangement we can settle, or at least an understanding. The ships are almost ready to send the first load of Dragonglass north. Perhaps that can happen now and we can sail with them." Jon glanced out the window to the restless sea. After a moment, he set his jaw. "You're right. Let's speak to Daenerys." He found her later in the Great Hall, conferring with Tyrion and Melisandre over maps. At his request, she dismissed her advisors, though Tyrion lingered near enough to overhear. Jon explained that he had received urgent news from the north and that he must return to Winterfell. He thanked her for allowing the Dragonglass to be mined and asked that she keep an open mind about the White Walkers in the coming months. She studied him for a long moment. "You wish to leave, but I have not fully decided on how best to help you," she said, her voice measured. "If you depart, will you come back to treat with me again, or will you renounce any claim of alliance with House Targaryen?" Jon hesitated, recalling how he had once died to uphold his promises. He was no oathbreaker by nature. "If you call me again and I can answer, I will. We face a threat that demands all living to unite. I will not abandon any chance of defeating the dead. But I must see to my people." Her eyes flickered with an emotion he couldn't place, perhaps disappointment, perhaps respect. "Very well, King in the North. Go, then. But I'll expect you to keep your word should the time come that I send ravens north. If you discover new proof of the White Walkers, share it with me. And remember, I have not asked you to kneel for the last time." Jon swallowed the lump in his throat. "Thank you. Your Grace." She inclined her head, turning away to study the map as though to hide her thoughts. Tyrion escorted Jon out, pausing in the corridor. "Farewell for now," Tyrion said, "and good luck. I fear the next time we meet, the realm may be in even greater turmoil. Or perhaps the dead will be at your doorstep." Jon nodded grimly. If they are, we'll hold them back as best we can. And if Daenerys truly wishes to break the wheel, let us hope she doesn't wait too long to stand with us. They departed Dragonstone at dawn. A small fleet carried crates of obsidian, enough to arm a fair number of fighters. Jon and Davos stood on the deck of one ship, the salt wind in their hair, as Dragonstone receded into the distance. A single black shape soared across the sky, one of Daenerys's dragons, perhaps Drogon or Rhaegal or Viserion, an unsettling reminder that unimaginable power lingered in her hands. Once at sea, the voyage north was dogged by fierce winds and choppy waters. Winter had begun to tighten its grip. Jon spent the journey reviewing how to best rally the north, how to distribute the dragonglass, and how to plan the defense of the wall. He feared that events might unfold faster than anyone expected. They docked at White Harbor, where Lord Manderley greeted them with a guarded but respectful welcome. Rumors of Daenerys's dragons had reached even here, making some uneasy. Nonetheless, the sight of ships loaded with obsidian caused a flurry of activity. Northern soldiers and workers rushed to unload crates. Jon spoke with Manderley about forging arrowheads, spear tips, and swords. Manderley appeared skeptical but recognized that these unusual black blades might be crucial if the king in the north believed in them. Finally, Jon returned to Winterfell. It felt like a dream to ride through the gates again, the yard bustling with men in stark livery. A swirl of snow and wind greeted him. Ghost, his dire wolf, bounded forward to greet him, pressing a cold nose against Jon's leg. Jon dismounted, scratching Ghost's fur, feeling a wave of relief at the familiar presence. He scanned the courtyard for Sansa, who soon emerged from within the keep. She looked visibly relieved, though there was a tension in her eyes. "It's good to see you," she murmured as they embraced. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd been swallowed up by southern politics." Jon let out a quiet chuckle. "It almost felt that way," he admitted. "But I've returned with dragonglass, a great deal of it. We can start forging weapons immediately. How fare the lords? Are they restive?" She hesitated. "Some are. Lyanna Mormont remains staunchly in your corner, but a few of the others question your absence. They worry you'll put the North second to southern alliances." Jon nodded, that old weight settling back on his shoulders. "We need them focused on the true enemy. Every house must prepare. Did you receive any further news about sightings of whites?" Sansa led him inside, talking as they walked through corridors lit by torches. "Yes, though they're still sporadic. A few men near the Umberlands claim to have seen small bands of the dead. Others say it's nonsense. The Umbers themselves are in chaos after everything that happened with the Boltons. But the fear is spreading." They entered the great hall, where a fire crackled in the hearth. Tables were arranged for a gathering of lords. Bran Stark was there, seated in a wheelchair, his face pale and distant. Jon noticed how different his younger brother seemed, an otherworldly calm that unsettled everyone around him. Arya stood nearby with a guarded expression, the glint of steel in her belt. The siblings had found their way back to Winterfell through hardship and tragedy, though Jon knew each was changed beyond recognition by their journeys. Bran's gaze latched onto Jon. "Welcome home," he said quietly, his tone devoid of warmth or emptiness, simply a statement of fact. "I've seen things. Some good, some very bad." Jon felt a chill. He had heard from Sansa that Bran claimed to be the three-eyed raven, that he had visions of the past and glimpses of the future. Jon swallowed, giving a tight nod. "I'm sure we'll speak more, Bran." One by one, the northern lords who had been waiting stepped forward. Glover, Serwyn, Mormont, and others. They offered greetings that wavered between relief and caution. Lady Mormont wasted no time. "You've returned, King in the North. We've heard you went south to treat with Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen. Is she our ally? Will she march north if we need her?" Jon met her fierce stare. "She pledged to provide dragonglass, and has allowed us to mine it from Dragonstone. She may lend aid if we can convince her that the threat of the White Walkers is pressing. For the moment, she's engaged in a war against the Lannisters in the south." Some grumbling rippled through the hall, but Lady Mormont jutted her chin forward. "All well and good, but if she's too busy playing queen, that does us little use when the dead knock on our doors." Her voice rang with frustration, an echo of the sentiment shared by others. Jon's voice hardened, quietly commanding. "We must act as if we stand alone for now. The dragonglass is here. We will arm as many as we can. The wall stands, but we must fortify the castles along it. Every man, woman, and child who can hold a weapon must be prepared to fight." Murmurs of agreement and some reluctant acceptance passed through the assembly. Jon caught Sansa's gaze. She seemed troubled but resolute, nodding as he spoke. They had no choice but to prepare, with or without Daenerys's immediate support. After the lords departed, Sansa ushered Jon to a private chamber where wine and bread awaited. Arya followed them inside, silent as a shadow, while Bran was wheeled in by a servant. Jon closed the door, releasing a weary breath. The 4 Stark children, survivors, though each had lost more than they could say, stood in a circle of uncertain camaraderie. Sansa broke the tension first. "It's remarkable that we're all here. Even if things are difficult, at least we are together. We'll make the North strong again." Arya nodded, her gray eyes flickering with a quiet determination. "And any Southern queen who tries to meddle, we'll keep watch. No more Boltons, no more treachery within our walls." Jon nearly flinched at that. He had no wish to sow further suspicion of Daenerys. He raked a hand through his dark hair. "I don't think Daenerys is another Bolton. She's fierce, maybe ruthless when needed, but she stands against slavery and tyranny. She's helped me gather dragonglass for our fight. If the day comes, I believe she'll send what aid she can, especially her dragons." Bran spoke, his voice unearthly, as though coming from a place beyond the mortal realm. "She carries fire within her, and you carry ice. I've seen the visions. You two are bound in ways you don't yet grasp." He paused, gazing at Jon, eyes gleaming with knowledge. "You were never father's bastard." Arya and Sansa both stiffened at that. Jon felt his stomach lurch. Of course, Bran had these visions. He might know the truth of Jon's parentage. The same truth Lyanna Stark had revealed in the crypt. Jon took a measured breath, but it was Sansa who asked in a soft, quivering voice, "What do you mean?" Bran's gaze did not leave Jon. "You are Aegon Targaryen, the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. Father, Ned, took you in to protect you from Robert Baratheon's wrath. Lyanna made him promise before she died in the tower." Sansa's face went pale. Arya's expression flickered with shock, her lips parting. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of that revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Finally, Sansa murmured, "Jon, is that true?" Jon pressed his eyes shut for a moment, recalling the dreadful memory of Lyanna's resurrected body, her voice croaking out Rhaegar's name and revealing Jon's true name. He nodded. "It is. Bran has the visions, but He swallowed. "Melisandre used dark magic to bring back my mother's spirit just long enough for her to confirm it. Lyanna Stark died giving birth to me. Rhaegar was my father." Arya's eyes darted back and forth as though searching for a missing piece. You're our cousin, then not our half-brother." A tinge of sadness marred her face. "But that doesn't change what we've been through together." Jon exhaled, relief warring with turmoil. "You're right, it doesn't change that. I'm still a Stark in my heart, even if the blood in my veins is also Targaryen." Sansa struggled to speak, her voice tight. "Why didn't you tell me when you came back? Did you think I'd reject you?" Jon shook his head. "No. At first, I could hardly believe it myself. And then I feared it would complicate matters further. We're fighting a war. The Northern Lords might not trust me if they learn I'm half Targaryen. I wanted to maintain unity." Arya pressed her lips together, thinking, "And if Daenerys Targaryen learns you're also of her house, with a claim to the Iron Throne?" Jon raked his fingers through his hair in frustration. "That's exactly the problem. If she thinks I have a stronger claim, it might lead to conflict. I don't want that. I don't want any throne except perhaps the seat of Winterfell if it means protecting our people. The White Walkers are what matter." Bran spoke with that otherworldly calm again. "The secret won't remain hidden forever. The past has a way of shaping the future, no matter how we try to stifle it. You will both have to face this truth in time." A hush followed. Then Sansa placed a hand on Jon's arm, a show of solidarity. "We will stand behind you, no matter your name or birth. We've lost too much to let this tear us apart." Arya nodded, though her face bore the hardness of a girl forged by suffering. "You're still my brother or cousin. Doesn't matter. I'll fight with you, always." Jon's chest constricted with gratitude. He offered a faint smile that did not reach his eyes. Thank you. Both of you. And Bran, thank you for telling us. Bran's gaze shifted to a point beyond them as though glimpsing something none of them could see. Just be ready, Jon. Winter is here. Over the following weeks, Winterfell hummed with activity. Smiths toiled day and night, shaping dragonglass arrowheads, daggers, and spear tips. Ravens were sent to every holdfast in the north, urging them to arm their men with these new weapons. Sansa reorganized supply lines. Arya quietly trained volunteers in stealth and swordsmanship. Bran spent much of his time near the Heart Tree, his face distant as if warding into the Weirwood's memories. News trickled in from beyond the wall. The free folk who had resettled in some of the northernmost areas began to send messages. The whites were on the move, scattered but ever-present. Tormund Giantsbane, stationed at Eastwatch by the sea with a band of wildlings, sent word that strange lights had been seen on the horizon, accompanied by howls that did not belong to living things. Fear gnawed at the edges of the north like a pack of wolves closing in on wounded prey. One frosty morning, a raven arrived bearing Daenerys' seal. Jon opened it with trembling fingers. Her words were concise. News had reached her of increased White Walker activity. She demanded proof, if any existed, that could convince the Southern Lords and her allies to focus on the threat. Perhaps, she said, if a white or undead creature could be brought to King's Landing for all to see, a truce might be forged even with Cersei for the sake of the living. Jon's brow furrowed. Such a mission would be perilous, but if it could unite the realm against the dead, it might be worth the risk. Tormund had, after all, suggested that small scouting parties of whites could be found near the wall. Perhaps capturing one was possible. He summoned a war council that same day. Sansa, Davos, Tormund, who had arrived at Winterfell for supplies, and others gathered around the great table. Jon explained the message that Daenerys was willing to meet with Cersei in a neutral arrangement if an actual undead creature could be presented to prove the threat. Davos muttered that it was a fool's errand, but Tormund jumped on the idea. We've fought smaller groups of whites before. A well-armed party might be able to isolate one, capture it, and bring it south. It's risky as hell, but it's not impossible. Sansa looked torn. If it could bring a truce, if it could convince the entire realm to unite, then maybe it's worth it. But who will lead this expedition? Jon's face was set in determination. I will. If we're asking men to risk their lives, I won't hide behind my walls. Sansa's hand clenched the edge of the table. Jon, you're the king in the north. If you go and fail, we lose more than a white. We lose our leader. We lose you. Jon recalled how Ned Stark had always said the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. This was not a mere sentence, but a mission on which the entire realm might depend. I have to do it. People follow me because they know I won't ask them to do something I wouldn't do myself. Arya said nothing, but the look in her eyes spoke volumes. Worry for Jon, determination that she could protect him if needed. Tormund slammed a fist on the table with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Then I'm going with you. A ragtag band heading beyond the wall to capture an undead monstrosity. Sounds like a good day's work. Jon looked to Davos, who offered a grim nod. I'm no fighter these days, and my bones freeze at the thought of the far north. But if you truly must go, I'll stay here to keep the peace, or at least do what I can with the lords. Send a raven to the Dragon Queen. Let her know your plan. They agreed on a small group. Jon, Tormund, and a handful of skilled fighters chosen from both Northmen and Free Folk. They would travel to Eastwatch, scout for a white, and attempt the seemingly impossible. Jon sent a message to Daenerys, informing her of the plan and urging her to meet them in the north if she wished, or at least to stand ready for the outcome. The day they departed Winterfell was bleak and cold, the sky veiled in heavy clouds. Sansa stood on the ramparts, her cloak fluttering in the wind, watching Jon ride out with Tormund and the others. Arya was at her side, arms crossed, trying to mask her concern. Bran remained indoors, though Jon had visited him before leaving. Bran had said in that quiet, haunting voice, "Be careful, Jon. The dead are cunning. They do not walk alone." Jon wondered if Lyanna Stark's ghostly revelation had set him on a path that no mortal man should tread. He was Aegon Targaryen by birth, yet he had been raised as a Stark. And now, in an eerie echo of the old legends of the Long Night, a Targaryen-Stark hybrid was venturing beyond the wall to snatch a piece of death itself. The irony was not lost on him as he spurred his horse onward, the biting wind slashing across his cheeks. They traveled swiftly, passing the remnants of war-torn towns. Occasionally, they encountered small pockets of free folk who recognized Tormund and greeted them with cautious respect. The air grew colder, the landscape more barren. Finally, Eastwatch by the sea appeared on the horizon. A stout fortress perched where the wall met the gray, churning ocean. Its towers rose against the bleak sky, battered by wind and salt. Torches flickered along the ramparts, half lost in the swirling mist. Inside the castle walls, the men of the Night's Watch who remained, thinned by war and desertions, met them at the gates. Tormund greeted old allies with rough embraces. Jon introduced himself as the king in the north, though the Watchers seemed more interested in the plan that had been whispered, capturing a White. Their faces held doubt, even dread. "If you're mad enough to go looking for dead men," one said, "we'll not stop you, but you won't find it easy." Jon only nodded grimly. He spent that evening preparing supplies, dragonglass weapons, ropes, cages they had cobbled together from iron bars. The wind howled against the high walls and the men took shelter in the gloom of the fortress's halls. Tormund recounted some of his battles with the dead north of the wall, describing how quick they could be, how relentless. The tension thickened like ice in water. At dawn, they set out beyond the wall on foot, the gates groaning shut behind them. The ice plains stretched out in all directions, shimmering under a pale, unforgiving sky. Vast glaciers loomed in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of death. Their breath plumed in the frigid air as they trudged onward, their footsteps crunching in the snow. Each man carried dragonglass-tipped weapons or a Valyrian steel blade if they were lucky enough to own one. Hours passed in silent vigilance. Tormund scouted ahead, occasionally pausing to peer at the horizon through narrowed eyes. Jon's heart hammered every time the wind gusted, half expecting to see a horde of Whites cresting a hill. But for a while, they encountered nothing, only the endless, frozen wilderness. Then, near a rocky outcropping that jutted from the snow like a broken thong, they spotted movement. Tormund raised a hand, signaling them to slow. Through the blowing snow, they saw a small group of shambling figures, perhaps half a dozen Whites, stumbling over the ice, their once human bodies withered and gray, eyes glowing with eerie blue light. Jon felt his blood turn to ice. Here they were, so close. The plan was to ambush and isolate one, subduing it and dragging it back. But Whites rarely traveled without White Walkers nearby, and the presence of even a handful was dangerous. Tormund gestured for the group to spread out and circle around. As quietly as possible, they drew their weapons. 2 archers readied obsidian-tipped arrows. A third man carried a net and rope. Jon tightened his grip on Longclaw, the Valyrian steel sword that had served him well against the dead before. His heart pounded in his ears. Memories of Har Home tore through him, panicked screams, the unstoppable wave of corpses. He forced himself to focus. They closed in. The Whites jerked around, sensing living flesh. A sickly hiss escaped their throats. Jon gave the signal and the archers loosed arrows. 2 Whites went down, spines snapping as the black arrowheads punched through. Tormund lunged with a spear, pinning another to the ground. A swirl of frantic movement followed, men shouting as they tried to corral one White without destroying it. The stench of rot and the sound of brittle bones cracking filled the air. Jon hacked the arm off a White that lunged at him, sending it flopping into the snow. Another came at him from the side, but a northern man tackled it, wrestling to keep it pinned. Tormund roared as he smashed the net over a thrashing White's torso. With a desperate grunt, several men heaved it to the ground and bound its limbs. It all happened in a chaotic burst of violence that left them panting in the snow. 3 of the Whites had been destroyed, but one was indeed captured, trapped beneath ropes and net. Its jaw snapped wildly, eyes burning blue. "We've got the bloody thing." Tormund exhaled, spitting onto the ice. But the victory was short-lived. A piercing shriek ripped through the air, echoing off the ice. Everyone froze. From the northern horizon, a group of dark figures emerged, a much larger contingent of Whites, led by at least 1 White Walker mounted on an undead horse. The group seemed endless, a phalanx of the dead moving with terrifying coordination. Jon felt dread churn in his stomach. "Retreat," he shouted hoarsely. They had what they came for, staying to fight a horde would be suicide. The men scrambled, dragging the snarling captive White behind them. The howling wind carried the shrieks of the undead as they surged forward. They ran for the outcropping, hoping to gain some advantage of terrain. The Whites were fast, scuttling over the snow like spiders. Jon turned to slash at a corpse that nearly seized him. Tormund bashed another with his shield, sending it reeling, but more replaced it. Panic threatened to seize them all, and one of their group went down under a swarm of icy claws. Jon roared in anger, driving Longclaw through a white skull, but it hardly slowed. He had to behead it before it finally collapsed in the snow. At the corner of his vision, he saw the White Walker approach, a tall, gaunt figure with pallid skin and pale blue eyes. It wielded an icy spear that glinted with malevolence. Jon knew how dangerous they were. One blow from that frosty weapon could shatter steel or freeze flesh on contact. They had to flee, but there was nowhere to go except the direction of Eastwatch. The storm intensified, blowing drifts of snow so thick it was hard to see. The undead closed in from multiple sides. Every breath tore at Jon's lungs as he stumbled through the shifting whiteness, calling for Tormund, for the others, praying they still had the captive White in tow. Suddenly, a thunderous roar shattered the air, reverberating across the icy plain. Jon spun, disoriented, to see a vast shape loom overhead. It was a dragon, wings spanning the gray sky, jets of flame spewing from its maw. In the next instant, another dragon soared in behind it, unleashing a torrent of fire that incinerated a swath of wights. The creatures screamed as they were consumed, the snow melting into steaming water around them. A blur of motion, Daenerys Targaryen astride Drogon, her silver hair whipped by the wind. Rhaegal soared beside them, bearing no rider. Jon's heart jolted. She had come north with her dragons. On the horizon, the third beast, Viserion, circled in a wide arc, also spouting fire into the writhing masses of undead. A wave of heat blasted over Jon, forcing him to stagger back from the sudden torrent of flame. Daenerys guided Drogon lower, scorching the ice in a wide line that separated the White Walker's forces from Jon's beleaguered band. Tormund hollered in triumph at the sight, though the wind and roaring flames drowned out most of his words. Men hurried to pull the captive White onto higher ground as the dragons lashed the undead horde with blistering columns of fire. Jon saw the White Walker raise its spear of ice, aiming at one of the dragons. Terror clamped down on him. He remembered what had happened at Har Home when the Night King had thrown a spear that nearly felled them. Daenerys must have realized the danger as well, for she urged Drogon to ascend, swirling out of range, while Rhaegal banked sharply. The White Walker hurled its spear, and it flew through the air with a crystalline whistle, but it fell short, shattering in the ice far below the dragons. A thunderous cheer erupted from the men on the ground. The dragon's onslaught continued, driving back the undead, though still hundreds, if not thousands, of wights lurked beyond the curtain of flame. Daenerys brought Drogon down to the plains, stirring up snow. She called out, her voice faint over the roar. "Get on. We must leave." Jon gestured frantically, urging his men to bring the captive White. With great effort, they hoisted the half-bound, snapping creature and hauled it toward Drogon. The dragon snarled at the White's foul scent, but Daenerys hissed a command in Valyrian. She extended a hand to Jon, her eyes aflame with urgency. Jon grasped her arm, and with help from Tormund pushing from below, he managed to climb onto Drogon's back. A scramble ensued as Tormund and a few others clung to the dragon's sides. The rest ran toward Rhaegal, who landed briefly, allowing them to clamber onto its harness. Viserion circled overhead, unleashing more gouts of fire to keep the dead at bay. "Hold tight," Daenerys shouted. She urged Drogon upward. The dragon's powerful legs bunched, and they leapt into the air with a furious flap of its wings. The wind whipped at Jon's face as they ascended. He clung to Daenerys' waist, the captive White thrashing in a net strapped alongside them, letting out a piercing hiss. Terror mingled with adrenaline. He had never flown a dragon before. The ground fell away beneath them, revealing a sea of white ice dotted with swarms of undead. The White Walker's pale visage tilted upward, its eyes burning with hatred, but it had no means to reach them now. In moments, they soared beyond the range of the army, the biting wind lashing at them like knives. Jon's heart thundered with the surreal reality of it. He was flying on a dragon, next to Daenerys Targaryen, carrying a living corpse in a net as proof of the realm's doom. This was the world they lived in now, twisted by prophecy and ancient horrors. Below, Viserion and Rhaegal also turned, following Drogon as Daenerys led them southward, away from the White Walkers. They landed near Eastwatch, the fortress's gates opening to admit the dragons. The men scrambled off, hearts pounding, and the captive White was thrown onto the ground, still snapping. Daenerys dismounted gracefully, though her eyes were wide with the aftershock of battle. Jon nearly collapsed to his knees as adrenaline left him, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. She had saved them. If not for her timely arrival, they would have been overrun. Daenerys turned to him, breath ragged. "I received your raven about capturing a white. I came to see if you truly meant to do it, if you truly believed it could unite us all. I didn't expect to find you in the middle of an army of the dead." Jon's voice came out hoarse. "I'm grateful you did." He looked down at the vile creature thrashing in the net. It was once a man, flesh rotting, black ichor dripping from its mouth. Here it is, the living proof. She stared at it with revulsion. Then her gaze softened when it returned to Jon. "You're so convinced that showing this to Cersei or to the lords of Westeros will unite them?" Jon nodded solemnly. "If they see it with their own eyes, if they hear its screams, maybe that will be enough to break through petty loyalties. The threat is real. If we don't stand together, we die alone." She studied him, the lines of her face etched with fatigue and awe. The others began to gather around. Tormund, bruised and battered, the northern men who survived, a handful of Daenerys's riders. The stench of the white made the horses jitter. Ghosts snarled at the undead thing, hackles raised. Finally, Daenerys drew in a slow breath. "Then we take it south to King's Landing," she said. "I will call for a truce with Cersei Lannister if only to prove the existence of this threat. Tyrion and my other advisors might arrange a meeting. And you, Jon, you must stand beside me. Together, we will show the realm what's coming." Jon felt the enormity of her words. He wanted to recoil at the thought of traveling into the heart of Lannister power. But what choice did they have? "I'll do it. We must. But we should move quickly, before the dead march further." She nodded, brushing a stray lock of silver hair behind her ear. "Agreed. We'll fly the white in a crate on one of my ships. We'll keep it under guard at all times. If Cersei sees it..." Suddenly, there was a roar from behind. They spun to see Regal landing heavily, wings folding with an agitated snap. On its back was a single rider, a figure clad in northern furs, though slight of frame. Jon's heart lurched. It was Arya, her hair wind-whipped, face set in a mixture of triumph and terror. She had leapt at the chance to join the rescue once Regal landed for a moment. She slid off the dragon's side, nearly stumbling on the icy ground. Tormund barked a startled laugh. Arya's eyes darted from Daenerys to Jon. "I caught a ride," she said, voice shaking with adrenaline. You were surrounded. I couldn't just watch." Jon's chest tightened. He gripped her shoulders, searching her face. "You fool," he murmured, though relief warred with exasperation. "You could have been killed." She shrugged, a half-grin forming. "I've faced death enough times. This was worth it." Daenerys watched them both, an odd expression flickering across her features. Perhaps a blend of admiration for Arya's bravery and uneasy recognition that these Starks operated by their own code. Then her gaze returned to the white. "We'll arrange transport to Dragonstone first, then to King's Landing. The sooner we show the world the truth, the sooner we can turn all our forces north." Jon nodded, a swirl of relief, dread, and strange gratitude churning in him. He glanced at Daenerys, recalling Bran's words that they were bound in ways yet unknown. He remembered the revelation of his name, Aegon Targaryen, and how it might change everything if she learned the truth. But for now, one step at a time, they had captured the living proof. He prayed it would be enough to unite the realm before the Great War consumed them all. They set to work immediately, building a sturdy cage reinforced with dragonglass bars inside the courtyard of Eastwatch. The white, bound in netting, was thrust inside. It scratched and hissed, eyes burning with unnatural malice. Men shuddered at the sight, crossing themselves. Some muttered that it was an unholy abomination. Jon had seen enough to know how lethal it could be if loosed. Throughout the night, they tended their wounded, shared meager meals, and prepared for the journey south. Daenerys's dragons took turns circling overhead, keeping watch. Now that they had glimpsed the enemy in all its horror, some of her men were shaken, the bravado of conquest eroding under the weight of a foe that did not fear dragons so easily. Jon overheard some of them whispering about the countless dead that might wait beyond the horizon. Exhausted, he found a quiet corner within the castle walls to rest. Arya sat beside him, cleaning the blade of her dagger, a piece of Valyrian steel she'd acquired through her grim travels. She glanced at him. So you really mean to bring that thing to Cersei? She'll probably try to use it against you somehow. Jon sighed. She might. But what choice do we have? We have to try. Maybe she'll see sense if a monster is snarling in her face. He rubbed his temples. I can't believe how mad this world has become. Arya shrugged, sliding the dagger into its sheath. We've always lived in a mad world, Jon. It's just more obvious now. With that, they sat in companionable silence, waiting for dawn. A new day would bring them closer to King's Landing, closer to a confrontation that might shape the fate of Westeros, one that neither the living nor the dead could ignore. And all the while, Jon carried the secret of his Targaryen blood, a secret that might either heal the realm or rend it further apart, depending on how it was revealed and to whom. When the first glow of pale light touched the eastern sky, they rose. Daenerys was already overseeing the loading of the caged white onto a ship. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion would fly overhead, a terrifying escort that few fleets would dare challenge. Tormund and some of the free folk chose to remain at Eastwatch to reinforce the wall, while Jon, Arya, and a handful of others boarded with Daenerys. The journey south began. Each day's travel brought them closer to the labyrinth of southern politics, to Cersei Lannister, and to the moment the entire realm might witness the horror they had captured. Jon stood at the prow of the ship, the wind tangling in his dark hair, Ghost at his side. He gazed at the horizon, recalling the first time he had sailed to Dragonstone. So much had changed in so little time. He had allied with a dragon queen, flown upon a dragon's back, and snatched a piece of the undead from the icy jaws of death. Yet more unimaginable challenges lay ahead. He thought of Lyanna Stark's final words, the raw desperation in her undead voice. Unite them, my child, unite them. He wondered if this was what she had foreseen, a precarious alliance built on a single piece of living proof. Perhaps it would be enough to save them. Perhaps not. He closed his eyes, letting the salt air and the faint sound of the dragons overhead wash over him. The realm's fate hung on a knife's edge, balanced between the White Walkers' relentless march and the uneasy alliances of the living. Jon could only hope that, Targaryen or Stark, living or resurrected, he might guide them all toward survival. Winter was here, and the final dance between ice and fire had begun.